It's not quite the same as our NBC News projections in last night's primaries in Arizona and Michigan, but it's pretty safe to say at this point, Vladimir Putin is already your projected winner in Sunday's elections in Russia. Make no mistake, however, he is hardly the choice of all of the people in Russia. Massive protests against Putin have clogged the city streets, and dissidents, here's the difference, now feel free to speak up. As Harry Smith discovered, it's all very reminiscent of what swept through the Middle East last year, so much so some are already calling this the Russian Spring.
Moscow, February 4th. The temperature, 10 degrees below zero. Not exactly perfect conditions for a protest march. We know. We were there. Yet more than 100,000 people walked 2 miles on a bitter Saturday afternoon with one clear purpose, one single message. Putin, go away. And among the leaders, a 35-year-old blogger in a floppy fur hat. His name, Alexei Navalny. This massive crowd was formed first on the internet, linked up through social networks.
Of all the signs and all the different allegiances that are represented out here today, this may be the most important one of all. This is a flag that says Facebook. If there's no Facebook, there's no revolution.
And the man with the most friends, it seems, is Navalny.
Putin very famously has had control of the mass media, of the big newspapers, of the television, of the radio, but he seemed not to care about the internet. Did he make a big mistake?
Yes, indeed. It was a big mistake, which they now regret.
Brilliant, audacious, and apparently fearless, Navalny speaks truth to power. Through its website, his tiny law firm exposes corruption. His biggest targets, Putin and his party, United Russia.
You have a nickname for United Russia. You call it the party of crooks and thieves?
Yes, this has become a sort of motto in our struggle against United Russia that has led to our current confrontation in the streets.
While the demonstrators demand Putin's ouster, many dream of a day he'd be put on trial. And the internet being what it is, a faked video now making the rounds shows exactly that. Putin in a cage. Navalny understands and speaks English, but says he thinks better in Russian.
As I sit here in conversation with you, I'm amazed that Putin would allow you to exist.
This is totally not true. He did everything to make sure we did not exist.
Because in Putin's Russia, real political opposition has been rendered impotent by the Constitution. Meanwhile, Russia's huge oil and gas resources have made Moscow a consumer's paradise with enough wealth to presumably mollify the masses. It is, however, a system where the rich and powerful, the connected, live by their own rules. And that is where Navalny found his niche.
How much does this have to do with day-to-day corruption in Russia?
I think that corruption has been a constant irritant which kept on building along with resentment. Every day you open your morning newspaper and read about somebody stealing another $1 billion, and you realize that nobody is going to be punished. There will be no trial.
You get a sense people here are tired of being insulted on matters big and small. Like in Moscow's impossible traffic, nothing moves except the cars of government officials or VIPs with special blue lights who whiz by in a separate lane. Or more important, when last September, Russians learned Vladimir Putin wanted to swap jobs again with his hand-picked president, Dmitry Medvedev. A deal, it turns out, made 4 years before. And then again in December.
Putin's mistake is that he staged an electoral fraud in the city of Moscow, so obvious and arrogant that it was taken by the people as a slap in the face.
During a crucial vote for control of parliament, there were widespread allegations of fraud perpetrated by Putin's party. Navalny and other activists took to the internet to post reports and videos of the alleged abuses. This one on YouTube was posted by a volunteer who claimed to have caught Putin's supporters red-handed, manipulating results at a Moscow precinct. We went to the Russian White House, Putin's headquarters, to talk to his chief spokesman, Dmitry Peskov.
Was there cheating during the elections?
We cannot deny it. Cheating happens everywhere, in every country.
But Peskov added that if any small incidents did occur, there was no real proof of a rigged election. Alexei Navalny says that's a joke.
His party, United Russia, obtained a majority in the parliament as a result of obvious and arrogant fraud. And this fraud brought people to the streets.
It was a night that shocked Russia and the world. When the polls closed, Navalny and others organized demonstrations by blog and on Facebook and by Twitter. Incredibly, more than 7,000 enraged demonstrators swarmed central Moscow.
I was arrested.
As were hundreds of others. Navalny was put in jail for 15 days. The charge? Obstructing traffic. While he was in jail, the demonstrations grew larger and larger. 5,000 registered on Facebook to join the protest, then 20,000, then 50.
Of course, we were very upset that we could not be there, but we could not believe that such things were really taking place in Moscow.
Navalny was released December 21st. And on Christmas Eve, an amazing sight, the biggest demonstration since the fall of communism.
At the demonstration, I said that right now we can go and take the Kremlin, which frightened many people, but it was true.
The movement had a charismatic leader, but Navalny's enemies were ready. In an attempt to discredit him, a pro-Putin web video was produced comparing Navalny with Adolf Hitler.
Your critics say the problem with Navalny is he's a nationalist. He may also be a racist.
This is a political cliché. Conservative groups, some of which support me, are far more liberal than their counterparts in the USA. Rallies in support of Sarah Palin have much more nationalistic slogans than in Russia.
And then, a doctored photo appeared in a Putin-leaning newspaper, showing Navalny with an arch-enemy of the state, an exiled oligarch in London. The real photo was actually with Russian presidential candidate and New Jersey Nets owner Mikhail Prokhorov. The goal of the fake, to suggest Navalny is a foreign puppet whose strings reach all the way to Washington.
Does Mr. Putin believe that foreign forces are at work trying to destabilize Russia?
Yes, yeah.
Including the United States?
I'm speaking about, let's say, influence coming from abroad.
Without naming names?
Without naming names, yeah.
What does Mr. Putin think of Alexei Navalny?
He wouldn't over-exaggerate his importance. He's very negative on some nationalistic statements by Navalny.
Does he think he's dangerous?
No, I don't think so. Why should he consider him to be dangerous?
Fighting corruption.
If Navalny is not considered dangerous, it sure looks like he's under surveillance. On a walk near his office, he showed us.
These guys right out here?
Yeah,
they're following.
Yeah, they are all the time following me, and another car all the time following my wife. And it's very funny because they are changing the plates on the car, but they're not changing cars.
Are you afraid for your life at all?
This is part of the job. The unpleasant part of my job is to realize that there is a threat. It is a bigger problem for my wife and my mother. I am trying to ignore this danger.
But one of the foremost experts on Russian politics is not so dismissive. Lilia Shevtsova of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace.
I'm amazed that Navalny has been allowed to have the voice he's had. How does that happen?
Because he became too popular. He became too known. Now, to finish him, to erase him, it will be a scandal.
Yet Russia is a dangerous place for muckrakers. Nobody knows the exact circumstances, but in 2006, journalist Anna Politkovskaya was also well known, famous for uncovering alleged abuses of power.
Which didn't prevent her from her fate. So there is nothing. Well, I would stop better here, because otherwise I will be blown by the wind.
She was killed.
She was killed. She was killed. Harry, there is nothing certain here. Society is based on two principles, fear and loyalty. Either you obey these principles and you are safe, or you don't obey, and your present and future are uncertain.
Which makes these protests all the more remarkable.
It's amazing to be in the middle of this crowd and to feel the freedom that people are experiencing here, even freedom of speech. Look at the sign. It says Mubarak equals Gaddafi equals Putin.
Is this the beginning of Russia's equivalent of the Arab Spring? Can the Putin regime be brought down?
Do you want to become president?
I want real elections. We want elections which will be open for everybody who wants to take part, including me. If there's an election like that, I'll take part in it.
How do you think this will end? What is Russia going to be like 5 years from now?
Like in American movies, there will be a happy ending. There will be no troops with rifles marching in the streets.
Just people with computers and cell phones.
Yes, iPads have replaced rifles.
Harry Smith back from Russia here in the studio. Dual question. Will Putin stop at anything? And what happens to this movement Monday morning after NBC News projects a Putin victory?
Yeah, really. The question is, will Putin try to put this genie back in the bottle again? There are people within his own party who say he really is at this gigantic turning point. Will he start to try to accommodate some of the complaints, or will he go back and crack down sort of old school the way he's always done?
And do these guys have the drive to stay in the game?
Well, and that was one of the questions I asked these folks. Will you go so far as to, perform acts of civil disobedience? Will this turn into another Tahrir Square? I don't think they're really quite ready to cross that yet.
It's warmer here in February, isn't it?
I still have a sweater on, though, too.
Better safe than sorry. Harry Smith, thanks for your reporting, as always.